Sunday. The fireworks I heard before noon were probably to announce the opening of the festival. The weather certainly wasn't festival weather. It was cloudy. The television forecast was calling for possible downpours starting this evening, lasting to around midnight. As long as it wasn't raining at the moment, the festival would go on. The festival had to open, or it wouldn't begin. The Furude Shrine grounds were probably decorated beautifully for the big performance that only happened once a year. Many paper lanterns were hung up, all in the auspicious colors of red and white. The sound of electric motors at the stalls, the voices of kids running around, their happy families watching them, smiling. Today was the festival of Watanagashi. Was everyone already partaking in the festivities? What about Satoko? Had she forgotten her days of sufferings for just a few moments, of smiling that brilliant smile she hadn't in so long? This would probably be the longest day of my life. It would be a day I remembered vividly for as long as I lived. I told my parents I'd go to the festival this evening and lounged about during the early afternoon. We may have lived under the same roof, but they couldn't help being surprised by the deviation from how I usually spent my time. Glancing at my parents out of the corner of my eye, I went to the front door. I tied my shoes just a little tighter than normal, as if to express the firmness of my resolve in those knots. When I decided to murder Satoko's uncle, I was in such a state of excitement I almost went crazy. Almost, he says. I know no one's there, but if I'm echoing, I'm sorry. I hope I'm not. And when I was planning out the act of a murder, which went directly against all of the morals fostered to me thus far, I was in such a state of calm, I almost thought I had lost my emotions. And then, yesterday, when I learned Satoshi had made exactly the same phone call as me, I didn't know how to describe the muddled feelings I had then. And now, entering today, right now, I lacked all the emotions I'd possessed until now. To make a simple analogy, it was the kind of feeling you might get right after you wake up when you're still half asleep and you don't feel anything very clearly. I had no anger towards that man for the violence he'd committed against Satoko, nor did I feel sadness towards or sympathize with her. I felt no discontent towards my friends. We just waited and watched, never reaching out to her with any help, and no nervousness or fear towards the day that had finally come. Yes. Right now, you could say I was in the best possible condition for carrying out a murder. When it came down to it, I would probably need to let my violent emotions take control. But right up until that moment, I would be like an insect. I would slowly, surely, and silently towards my one objective. And then, when I had my prey, I'd attack like a bullet. There was no emotion in that. Just the creeping mindset insects possessed. That sort of sneaking feeling was just the best. I would kill Satoko's uncle like he was a worm. I had to laugh a little at thinking that way. Thinking like an insect. Tug. I tightened my laces one more time and walked out the door. I borrowed the shovel out of the front storeroom. I would need it to dig the man's grave. The shovel was a convenient one made for camping. If I twisted it like so and split it into three, I could easily hide it in my bag. I twisted the shovel and dismantled it. Even though I'd done it countless times before, I had trouble for some reason. Like I was suddenly clumsy now. I knew why. It wasn't because I was nervous. My weak-willed self, deep within me, was hesitant. I knew that the act of dismantling this shovel was the first step I'd take to becoming a murderer. Oh! The last twist was conspicuously difficult, but it finally submitted before the strength of my determination. Let me just grab a sip of this here. Oh, it's still too hot, damn. The area around Satoko's house was outside my circle of activity. But even just riding my bike in the middle of the day like this might seem suspicious to an observant person. I definitely want to avoid meeting and talking to someone I knew. With that in mind, I chose the route to my destination carefully. I didn't mind going the long way around. With how long this day would be, I could never be too careful after all. Still, I was fortunate enough not to run across anybody on my way to the planned site of the crime. I wasn't superstitious at this point, but it was a good omen. The place I would dig the hole was in a grove a little further into the woods. I was worried I might not make it into the same place as before, since there were no signs to guide me, but I arrived there smoothly and as expected. I took another look around, not even a hint of human presence. The air was a little bit damp, but it was comfortable in the cool shade of the trees. I took the disassembled shovel out of my bag and began skillfully putting it together. Then, I stuck the tip of the shovel into a soft-looking patch of ground and pushed on it with my foot. The shovel would split into the earth if I put some strength into that foot. The act of doing so seemed awfully like the point of no return, and it made me hesitate. I was just digging a hole with the shovel, but it made me gulp hard. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. Let's do a countdown. Get it done on the count of 3, okay? Alright, 1, 2... I couldn't do it on the countdown, despite it just being sticking the shovel into the ground, and I had to count down 5 or 6 times. Damn it. I'm just digging a hole. This is pathetic. As I thought that, I put strength into my heel like I was stepping on something unpleasant, and split came the sharp noise. Whew. It was only soft at the beginning. Roots and stones quickly got in my way, informing me just how hard it was to dig a hole big enough for a person. No decent person would ever come here anyway. Maybe it would be enough to cover him up with some dirt. Every time a naive thought like that crept into my mind, I bit down on it with my teeth and dug even harder. I've dug enough now, I can hide him like this. Every time I thought that, I would go into the hole, grow disappointed at how shallow it was, and return to digging. The thin layer of sweat on my brow eventually formed into drops and fell to the ground. My back was in even worse shape. My damp shirt adhered to my skin. It felt so disgusting. The things I couldn't stand the most were the mosquitoes. Maybe they were attracted to the scent of my sweat. The white and black striped mosquitoes would cling to me whenever I let my guard down. It was hot. It was disgusting. I was sticky. I was itchy. All those uncomfortable feelings surged through me in waves. Damn it all. So what? Are you telling me to pack up and go home? Is that it? I hadn't yelled at anyone. It was me talking to myself, telling myself something. Why was I feeling this way? Digging a hole all the way out here. What benefit would digging this hole give me? What harm would there be in not digging this hole at all? Wait, in the first place, who ordered me to dig? When I thought it over, maybe ever since grade school, or even before that. My whole life. It had only been me doing what other people told me to. I didn't mean it was somehow constrained living a life just based on the commands of others, and I didn't mean I was too lazy to try and find my own road in life. Metaphorically speaking, yes, it was like a road. I'd never been particularly physically fit. I'd have hit puberty very early, and if all my classmates and I got in line, I'd usually be on the shorter end. My scores in jump rope competitions and marathons were the very picture of average, and it wasn't like the captains of the dodgeball teams would have a passionate rock, paper, scissors contest to see which would get me. During those kindergarten and grade school years, it felt like someone was only worth how fast they grew and how fit they were. Looking back on it now, it was really uncomfortable for me. The thing that turned all that around was just a few words from my mother. Keiichi, would you like to go to a cram school? You'll better grasp what you're learning in school, and it will be more fun. The very test I took at cram school was kind of like a game. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't like the tests with the same exact problem dozens of times in a row. Every question had a picture to it, almost like one of those puzzle books that came with manga magazines. If my studies at school had been like this, it would have been way more fun. Several days later, I went to the cram school again with my mother and the enrollment paperwork. Mom and the person at the cram school had a really long and heated discussion, so I accidentally dozed off and missed most of what they said, but I clearly remember one point. Mom had made a loud groan, surprised at something. By 61, do you mean his average score was 61 points? No, not at all, Mrs. Mayabara. The mean deviation of our cram schools all across the country is 61. He's showing rare numbers, even if this was just a simplified intelligence examination. First, I would like to say that Keiichi Mayabara-kun is extremely bright. Keiichi, but he doesn't have very good grades at school. He has average marks on his report cards, B's, C's, D's. Is there some kind of mistake? We gave him the Kraepelin test as well, and we learned some very interesting things as a result. Mayabara-kun is extremely weak when faced with questions that don't have any meaning. He just has no interest in simple, dull questions that don't have to do with everyday life. So even if he doesn't know what 2 plus 3 is, if you told him he had 2 apples and then got 3 more, he would understand that sort of question? That's right. For example, instead of telling him to draw a flattened, foldable cube, what if we asked him what a die would look like when cut open? If we did that, he can answer beautifully. Then the person from the cram school showed her a page from one of the exams I took. It was a paper with questions about construction. Construction questions were unusual, so they were really cool, weren't they? In this question, it asks to draw an unfolded regular icosahedron, a shape with 20 faces. When we rephrased it and asked him how he would cut out a piece of cardboard to create a 20-sided die, Keiichi-kun drew the answer as though it were easy. This is not something an average child can do. Keiichi, have you ever made a die with 20 sides from a magazine extra or anything? Dice only went from 1 to 6. I'd never even considered before this test that there was a dice with more than 6 sides. So it was fun to imagine what kind of shape a die that went up to 20 would have. If I had a die like that, I could win at dice games against anyone, so I immediately wanted to make it. Finally, I entered cram school. There were only 4 students in the class they put me in, which was called Select. It was the highest class, and some of my classmates were in lower classes, and when I remembered how much better they had done at things like dodgeball and the 50-meter sprint, I felt happiness well up within me for the first time. Even if I wasn't as good as them physically, I triumphed over them in other ways. It was fun at first. The more I did, the more I was praised. My teachers at school suddenly started pampering me, and it felt good. My parents were satisfied, too. And I enjoyed seeing them satisfied. The more I listened to my parents' commands, the more fun things got. That did happen, didn't it? I grinned dryly in self-depreciation because, well, my studious lifestyle didn't end up lasting very long. It was only at the beginning I enjoyed learning more and more. I gradually got along less with my friends. My classes were behind what I was learning in cram school. I eventually stopped respecting the teachers, given that they could put me to sleep with their lectures. Well, I was a disagreeable sort who bragged a lot about how much I knew. And the ways of the world wouldn't let me remain in that state of ecstasy forever. I would do as I was told, and then I'd go above and beyond their expectations, and then they praised me. I was happy for that, and the cycle repeated itself like the wheels on a bike. I thought moving forward like that was how life worked, like a bicycle. When I moved to Hinamizawa, I realized just how inadequate it was. Some things happened, and we started saying how moving and getting a change in atmosphere would be nice. Some things happened. And then my father, he had a place that he liked, that he'd gone to a few times to draw the nature. He started saying that he wanted to bring his atelier there. With me in blank amazement, they decided to move to Hinamizawa, and after that I met them, didn't I? First day after transferring here, I went to the classroom with the teacher. I thought it would seem pitiful for her to bring me in there, so I placed my hand on the door before she could, slammed it open, and set foot into the room. Clatter! The thrilling, powerful way I opened the door was none other than my own determination to try doing my life over again. And then, within seconds, that determination took a hard counter. I know what's coming. Took a counter down to the face. A blackboard eraser fell on me. Plus, there was a huge rock inside. It was a supremely painful trap that someone had set up. Oh, come on. Satoko was already beating me right from the first day I transferred. That frightened me. I was bewildered. The class was surprised too. I wasn't just surprised that the students in class were all in different grades and were different genders. It was because the room felt completely different from the schools I knew. And I spent more time with them, my surprise continued to grow. This fresh sense of surprise had never left my life, even to this day. Every day was a fresh new surprise. I've never had a single boring day since coming here. The days were lively, spent with the other club members. We played Old Maid with cards with scratches on the back to cheat. We let all our passions go wild during our games. We went all out as regular participants in tournaments at the toy stores in town and many, many more things. More recently, during those times, there was the bento competition. It was that's when I saw an unexpected side to Satoko. Thinking back on it, I only ate dinner with her 2 nights. It was such sweet, gentle time spent, and it warmed my heart remembering it even now. I realized that Satoko was pretending to be stubborn and firm, and how brave she was, part of her heart always waiting for her Nini to come home. And I vowed to become her Nini. Satoko may have been nagging and overly critical, but she knew how to take care of someone. But though it might have seemed like she was taking the lead, it was actually her way of depending upon another person. Even if Satoshi and Satoko's lives as siblings were confined by their uncle and his wife, they were still warm, sunny days. When did those sunny days all go wrong? What mistake was made? Lamenting tragedies of the past would do no good, and I told myself that so many times, but I did anyway. Eiichi, isn't that why you chose your own path to take back that life? Nobody ordered you to do this. You decided it on your own. You don't desire anyone's praise for this. You thought it all through yourself. You'll carve it out yourself. And you'll do it now. This wasn't a path I could see very far down. Not like the road parents or society could offer. It was a narrow path, dark, and utterly distressing. For one for which the next step would always be shrouded in darkness. But that disheartening path would keep on going forever. It was an unlimited path, and there was nowhere I couldn't travel. The kind of path only available to those who were able to imagine where they wanted to go. Don't be ashamed at breaking from the brightly lit paved road. In fact, I feel proud that you found your very own path to walk. In fact, feel proud that you found your very own path to walk. And I hadn't discarded the paved road either. I hadn't discarded that paved road either. Once I achieved my goal, I would go back to that bright road, and then I'd spend those average, sunny days at my leisure. Crush. When I next realized that the hole had grown so deep, I couldn't believe it. Did I dig all this myself? All right, let me just check and see how. I think I can drink some of this now, so just give me one moment here. Oh, okay, that was some good shit. Okay. I am back. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Talking is a lot better now already. That was fast. Did I dig all this myself? I think digging this much is enough. I put my shovel into the bottom of the hole. I would drag the body here, throw it into the hole, and cover it up with dirt. Even if it took me time to camouflage it by putting plants on top, It would all go much more easily than digging this hole had. I glanced at my watch. It was almost evening, and I hadn't realized it. I may not have felt the time passing, but digging a hole this deep must have taken quite a lot of time. I took a seat on a slanted rock nearby and wiped the sweat from my brow. Now, once it got a little darker, I'd go get the metal bat I hid in the schoolyard. Then I'd make the call to lure him out. And then, I'd do it. The number of things I needed to do to reach that moment were dwindling. I felt that moment closing in on me much more keenly than I did the passage of time. I didn't have any hesitation, but I still felt that. A contradiction. At every step in this process, I had a few chances to hesitate, to turn back, to let myself lose my nerve. Having to endure those million temptations and wait for when the time was right was an indescribably slow and painful torture. I had thought myself acting all weak because of that, but I stopped midway through. This was okay. It was fine. I could detest the abnormal act of homicide as much as I wanted, and it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be a cutthroat killer after today. I would pass through this strange day and go back to the world I was in before. I fell to the level of a psychopath who thought nothing of killing. I wouldn't be able to go back to my old life. So this was fine with me. I didn't have to feel ashamed at hesitating to kill, because I was human. It was so funny to me that I'd be the bearer of Oyashiro-sama's curse at the same time I was aware I was human. I exhaled lightly and stood. I concealed my presence and sharpened my senses in all directions to search for anyone around but me. Okay, let's go. One step at a time. I'd walk my own path, a path no one had forced me to walk. Let's do this. Keiichi Mayabara. The cicadas made an annoying fuss. The chorus covered up the suspicious noise of me breaking twigs underfoot, and their chorus filled the path far ahead of me, letting me know I would be alone for some time. The cicadas blessed the path I walked, encouraging me with every last ounce of strength they had. The sky was far above. In not even an hour, the veil of night would draw near, and the sky would be tinted with dusk. By that time, the Higurashi would let me hear their chorus in place of the cicadas. When that happened, would everything be over with? Would everything have ended? I said something along those lines when I left Satoko's fate up to a public agency. But this time was different. I would do it. I would carry it out. I would end it. It would all be over very soon. Everything would end. Yes, when the Higurashi cried. Title drop! Ooh, how ominous. There was nobody at school. I couldn't hear the playful voices of children. This was the first time I'd seen the school with such a lack of human presence. Still, I quieted my breath and looked around, not wanting to be unprepared. It had gotten darker outside, but it was almost like my eyes could see more clearly now. I made absolutely sure of my safety, then walked to the heavy construction machine I'd hidden the metal bat behind. I had a tinge of worry, a premonition that someone had found the bat and hid it somewhere else as a prank. If that happened, would I take that as an opportunity to desist? If it really wasn't there, then the sensation of chilled metal. It was still here where I left it. It hadn't run away. Satoshi hadn't run away. He'd waited here patiently. For me. Sorry for the wait, Satoshi. It's been a long time coming. You prepared for this? Through the metallic touch, Satoshi grins at me in my mind. That's what I should be asking, you know? I did this last year already. You should be more worried about yourself. Right on, Satoshi. Show him a bad time. Satoshi's bat got lighter and lighter and fit into my hand like it was being absorbed. It didn't feel wrong to swing this. I could move it around so naturally it was like an extension of my own right arm. Of course it felt like that. Satoshi and I were holding one bat together. Next, I would make the call to lure the man out. It wasn't a bad time for it. My friends were doubtlessly parading happily through the stalls. I hadn't considered where to make the call from. My house and Satoko's were pretty far apart. If I called from my house, I wouldn't make it. Couldn't I use the school's phone? But as I thought, the room was locked up and I couldn't get in. Shit. You're so naive. You should have at least figured this part out. I couldn't call him. And just for that, was today all over? Sorry, Satoshi. And just as I cursed my own naivety. Now, why am I having trouble with this word all of a sudden? Sudden! Oh no! A miracle occurred. A bicycle came to the schoolyard. Familiar middle-aged. One from the Forest Service Field. Why? Wasn't today Sunday? Was he here to pick up something he forgot? Anyway, the forest officer went around back and felt around in his pocket, then unlocked the door and entered. The best possible coincidence. And it had to be Satoshi who saved me. The metal bat, just my contact with it, told me this was a chance I couldn't allow to slip by. The sections for the forest office and the school were neatly separated. I felt the man head into the forest office's storehouse, which was so far in the back, students weren't allowed into it. The door didn't match its fittings. The door didn't match its fittings well, so it didn't close all the way. And the gap in the door opened slowly, as if to lure me in. I took a deep breath and went in. I tiptoed along silently and stealthily, and made it into the teacher's lounge. That was the only place with a phone. As I held my breath in the teacher's lounge, I heard the Forest Service officer walking back over. Then the back door clattered shut and was locked. I glanced out the window at the schoolyard and watched as the man got off his bike like nothing had happened, and rode out the school gate. The school once again emptied, becoming deathly silent. I waited for a bit to make sure the silence was the real deal, then reached for the telephone on the principal's desk. I fished Satoko's house number out of my pocket. Yes. The number in the class directory for Satoko had been the one from their house now, where she lived with her uncle. I touched the dial with my fingers and then thought for a moment about what to say exactly when he picked up. Despite how many times I'd gone over it in my head last night, now that I had my finger on the dial like this, it started to seep out my mind like a cracked bucket leaking water. So he should get flex tape! Simple would be best. More importantly, to say it straight and not sound suspicious, I counted off 3 heartbeats and spun the dial. The call sound. Would Satoko's uncle pick up? Now, of all times, the hope that he wouldn't pick up and the feeling of doom and the knowledge that I couldn't save Satoko if he didn't whirled around in a vortex. Hello? It was the voice of a grumpy man, like he had just woken up. He picked up. Hello? Say your name so I know you're Hojo, you asshole. It'd be terrible if I got it wrong. I made up my mind. I had all the initiative on my side. Here we go. This is the Shishibone Okinomiya police station. Am I speaking to the Hojo residents? I was changing my voice, but did he really think I sounded like an adult? Would he believe I was the police? Oh, yes. This is Hojo. We currently have your daughter, Satoko Hojo, here with us. What? Satoko? What did that brat do? He fell for it. I could tell by how tense he was that he didn't doubt my words. I can explain the particulars once you have arrived here. Would you mind coming to the station right away? Right now, I already took a bath myself, so I don't want to hang out like this, though. What? You don't want to come because you already took a bath? Yes, right away. Right away. Jeez, man, what the heck did Satoko do? I'll explain once you're here. I will be waiting. Thank you for your assistance. Ah, 1 second. I don't know where this police station is. Where am I going? Moron, what the hell? The Okinomiya police station? I don't know where it is either. Aren't you from around here? Why don't you know that? A greasy sweat came over my body. Eventually, just as I was about to choke, he spoke. Oh, next to the fire station, right? That's pretty far. Thank goodness you remembered the zone for me. I didn't care where the police station was, so long as he left his house to get there. Then we will be waiting here. Oh, wait. Who am I asking for once I get there? What is your name? On top of that, he wanted to know my name? Just leave your goddamn house already. Mayabashi. Excuse me. I was close. I almost thoughtlessly told him my real name. I managed to change the last syllable of it, but I put the receiver down like I was running away. My fingers were trembling, and I was soaked with a tepid sweat. I wasn't just nervous about the phone call. With that call, everything had finally been put into motion. I left the school. It was locked before, but it was easy enough to open from the inside. But I couldn't lock it again after I left. In terms of being thorough, I wanted to lock it. I couldn't waste time going back to the teacher's lounge and looking for the key. I needed to rush back as fast as I could and ambush him. I zoomed back to the scene on my bike. Satoko's uncle got out of town before I got there. Everything would be over. He'd learned there was no one at the station named Mayabashi, and things would get pretty messed up. As I returned at full speed, I passed a family wearing yugatas. They must have been on their way to the festival. Many people in Hinamizawa knew my face, though I didn't know theirs. Even just passing by them like this made me uneasy. But I didn't generally come around here, so those living in this area might not have known much about me. That didn't matter right now. I needed to get back as fast as possible, to control my breathing, and to ambush the man. I hid my bike in a thicket and picked up Satoshi's back, which I just left hidden in the shade. And give me another moment. There we go. One moment. Good shit. Good stuff. I hid my bike in a thicket and picked up Satoshi's back, which I just left hidden in the shade. And then I held my breath, waiting to see someone. I wondered if he still hadn't gotten here. Or maybe he went right out after the phone call and passed by here already? I couldn't figure out which his was. Nor was set upon by an indescribable impatience. Calm down, my Barakichi. Even if he came here already, he'd pass by here on the way back, right? The end result would be the same. It wouldn't change the fact that he'd die. He'd probably be coming on his motorcycle. How would I stop him then? I figured it would be best not to think too hard and just hit him as he passed or beat him out of his seat. The path was made of pebbles. If I hit him as hard as I could and made him lose his balance, he wouldn't be able to help falling. And then, the chorus of the Higurashi stopped. The sound of a bike approached from far away. I couldn't tell what sort of motorcycle it was from its sound, but I'd seen it parked before, so I'd know. It was getting rapidly closer. It was almost here. If he just went a little farther, he'd cross into that thicket and appear in front of me. I'd take a moment to make sure it was him, and then, when I had, I'd put my plan into action. The motorcycle appeared. This is it. A few easily identifiable characteristics told me it was Satoko's uncle's bike, without a doubt. Was it really him? Was it really Satoko's uncle? I wasn't making a mistake, was I? I looked at its characteristics again. Its color, shape, most of all, the man's clothes. And face! Those last feelings of hesitation, I did away with them. Satoko? Now, your Nini will end it, okay? Closer, closer. The bike came closer. Let's go. Satoshi! Whoosh! I jumped out of the thicket. I used my shoulder to basically tackle the uncle on the bike with all my might. Gave a dumb shout as his bike completely lost its balance. Finally, it fell, the bike scattering clouds of sand, and after spinning, it stopped. Her uncle, tossed to the ground, didn't understand what had just happened and groaned for a few moments, crouched on the ground. My breathing started to become ragged. No, I couldn't have this emotion. Some weird secretion crossed through my brain and nearly made me hallucinate. Her uncle was groaning. Now was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What was I doing? All the sounds in the world cut off. My mental chaos from a moment ago withdrew like a lie, and I could feel the temperature in my head rapidly cooling down, the tension in my muscles away like the strings they'd been attached to had been cut, and I let my hands dangle at my sides. It wasn't quite like exhaustion. Have you calmed down now? Keichimabara, you need to remember again why things got to this point today. Scrape. Scrape. I stepped over the pebbled path, taking one step, another step, then another towards Satoko's uncle. The more I walked, the more my breathing calmed. The more I walked, the more I felt my body cooling, calming, chilling with frost. Yes, at this moment, this guy had lost permission to live. I had just rescinded it, so he mustn't stay in this world any longer. If he lived any longer, if Satoko's misfortune continued, it would be my responsibility for having allowed him to live. I could feel the cooling substance going through my whole body, even down to my capillaries. Her uncle was at my feet now, still on the ground like an idiot. I smiled coldly at how ridiculous he looked. Ugh, that hurt. That's all it took for it to hurt. Satoko's heart hurt much more, and now you're gonna feel that. And with your life, I'll make up for her pain. I erased all unnecessary information from my mind. I prioritized the murder of this man. Execute, execute, execute! Wham! Utterly calmly. Oh, here we go! I delivered my first strike to the back of his head. I wanted to get at the most effective spot, at least during the first moment I'd have to attack him while he was still at his most defenseless. And if he was hit on the head, he'd cover his head. It was a defensive reaction all humans made, like machines. He used both hands to cover his head, so he couldn't pick himself up off the heap he was in the ground and on the ground. Like pounding a caterpillar into the dirt, I hit him over and over. If he covered his head, I'd hit him in the side. If he covered his body, I'd go for his head. If he rolled over, I'd strike his feet, his knees, his elbows. I didn't care where anymore. By just delivering one blow after another, I induced panic in him. I retained my overwhelming advantage, but I hadn't done nearly enough to deliver a fatal wound. Her uncle skillfully pulled himself up off the ground and started to run like a fleeing rabbit. It wasn't a judgment he'd made after seeing my fate. In deciding whether to fight me. Right now, he was fleeing by instinct. Instinct, just trying to escape from the threat that had presented itself. A counterattack from the more physically capable uncle was what I was most concerned about. He may have run, but it wasn't all that unlikely, and the odds were in my favor. The uncle didn't run away towards Peaceful, but off the path and into the woods. How pleasant that he would run in a direction where nobody else was. He was fleeing into strange geography, like a rat that instinctively runs right into tight spots over and over. Yes, he was no longer human. He was a rat. The blood vessels in my legs expanded and my total oxygen supply increased. I lowered myself to gain the most explosive velocity I could. Without breathing, I became a wind-like shadow and dashed. I crossed thickets, crushed dead tree branches underfoot, and dove through the woods like a bullet. He ran so cowardly, arms flailing as he went. After catching up to him, I didn't need so much as a blink of an eye to strike him again. My senses, mind, and body are all sharpened purely to kill this man. This was the first time I'd felt like this. Well, this was the first experience I'd ever had killing someone. It felt natural continuing to do this for the first time, and that meant I had this much talent for killing. Or perhaps the act of killing was so simple that anyone could do it. I didn't struggle or grow tired in all the chasing the clumsily fleeing or trying at all chasing the clumsily fleeing uncle. No matter how much he ran, it was like trying to get away from his own shadow. He couldn't get away from me. I could easily aim at his back, his shoulder, and his head even from this unnatural stance. Each time I struck him, he wailed in pain and begged pitifully for forgiveness, but it didn't disturb my mind. I was neither excited nor plagued by hesitation like before. I felt sharp. I felt like a carnivore. Of course, so did the uncle, who was trying to run away because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to be eaten. Like a herbivore, whatever, running with all its might, trying to get away. Despite all the attacks, despite all the hits, he kept on fleeing without even staggering. And despite the bad footing in the forest, he impressively never tripped over anything, but there was no need to admire that fact. It was simply proof that he was no more than an animal. If he was chased, he would run. If he was going to be killed, he would run. He bared his fangs at the weak, but couldn't oppose the strong whatsoever. He was lowly, vulgar, a diminutive animal. Such an puny little creature had harmed Satoko. Scar after scar to her body and mind, deep wounds that might not ever go away as long as she lived. Help! My cold and calm emotions suddenly turned into bestial ones. My personality changed. Something specialized for murder. Purely to devour the diminutive manimal before me. The uncle gave a puny little shriek, covered his head, and ran. I'm impressed by how much you can run. Fine, run as much as you like. I will be your death. I will choose the moment at my leisure. Your legs will hurt, your lungs will feel about to burst, your head will hurt from lack of oxygen. You feel the pain has become worse than death, then by all means. If you feel the pain has become worse than death, then by all means stop any time. Without turning back, suffocating on his terror of the approaching death, he just ran shamefully onward. He ran but was chased, his head bashed with a metal bat, sweat and drool flying everywhere, blood clinging to him. From his mouth came the sounds of coarse, irregular breathing and high-pitched screaming that verged on crying. And pleas for forgiveness to someone I didn't know who. Each and every second was a second of atonement that I granted him. Now run. And fall and moan and die. Where did you even crawl out of anyway? You were never here before. If you were never here, you never should have showed up. If you never showed up, our lives would still be fun and enjoyable. We would have gone to today's festival, waited for each other, and gone to the shrine, laughing. We would have been playing amongst the stalls right about now. We'd be browsing the strange food stalls you only saw at festivals, trying to get prizes from goldfish scooping, ring throwing, or target practice. Mion would surely make it into a competition, and we as a club would have had a grand time. And everyone would have been cheering for Rika-chan's dedication dance, and everyone would say how fun it was, and it would give us energy for days to come. Fun, enjoyable, and funny, warm times spent with friends. And that would have happened, but it didn't, and now it was all smashed to pieces. There was no doubt that would be what the world was like if you never showed up. You were the obstacle, the mistake, the heresy in that world. And I would correct that mistake now. I would erase you and make it so this last week never happened. The night was the Watanagashi festival, the holy night where taking just one life was permitted in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse. It looked like the Higurashi stopped crying at some point. When the Higurashi cried, everything would end. And the Higurashi silenced. Lowly one, the hour of atonement. Atonement is at an end. The Higurashi have stopped their crying, thus it is the end. The end! You don't have to run away anymore. Die with those dirty brains of yours smashed everywhere. Ugh. lightning and thunder struck like an explosion. It was so loud it shook the ground, and I smelled gunpowder. The response I got this time was clearly different from the one before. A metal bat crunched into the crown of his head. It was like the top of his head had caved in. The bat felt like it was biting him. It had been the final killing attack that visited him. When I didn't overlook the opening he left, that is, his knees gave out under. I remained alert for a few moments, then thud. Thud. I planted both knees in the ground, and then fell forwards, burying my head in the ground. I had been holding back my ragged breathing, but now it all came out of me like a dam bursting. My head was dizzy and light. Unable to maintain my balance, I leaned against a nearby tree. The uncle didn't try and guard his head any longer. After a disgusting sort of spasm, he stopped moving. Did I get him? Did I get him? For sure. I fought back my exhausted urge to fall over where I stood. I drew towards him carefully, bat still at the ready. It was possible he was faking it and trying to wait it out. Did I check for a pulse? I realized right away, though, how unnecessary that would be. If I thought he might be faking it, then I would just have to keep pummeling him until I was satisfied. I fought back my ragged breathing again, and then I swung my bat far above and brought it down. Plunk! His body leaped like a bow, but he didn't try and cover his head. Then, once again, I aimed for his head and swung. His reaction was the same this time. After spending a few moments making his head into mochi, the hits gradually started to feel different and started to spray a filthy, dark red liquid everywhere. That was enough. It was definite now. I had absolutely killed him. There was no sense of accomplishment nor one of regret. I didn't feel anger towards Satoko's uncle, nor pity towards Satoko herself. Instead, right now, I was feeling like my heart had been stolen by the downpour. It had begun to rain at some point, and how comfortable it had felt. The rainwater drenched my body and dripped to the ground. The excitement within me faded as the rain washed away the grime. In exchange, my shoes were so wet they made splashing sounds. And despite abusing Satoshi's bat like that, it wasn't bent very much. There were a few dents in it, probably from hitting the man, but nothing that would make it seem different from before. Instead, it had been stained with black, with red, with mud and blood. That itself would be evidence. The one piece of evidence needed to prove that my delusion hadn't just been daydreams and that I'd ended Satoko's uncle for all eternity. Alright, Keiichi. Calm your mind. Time for passion is over. Now is the time to be cold as ice. I needed to bury the body. But where was I? I'd simply followed the man as far as he ran into the darkness. I couldn't take a guess as to how far we'd run. It was already pitch black around us, and the only light I had to go on was the very faint lights on the road a little further down. It was so dark out. I hadn't noticed the darkness until just now. My vision was so good I could see the man's ugly hairline. I could have counted the pores in his head. It was only now that I realized how much crazy strength I had mustered at that moment. I went over to the streetlight. I looked up and down the road, desperately trying to figure out where I was. This is... Oh, no. This was the one road connecting Inamizawa to the town. We were unbelievably far away from Satoko's house. Had the two of us really run so far a distance? My surprise at that was accompanied by the knowledge of the miraculous fact that despite running so far and making so much noise, we hadn't come across anybody at all. There was a long way between here and the ambush location where I dug the hole. There was no way I could carry the body that far. Wait, aside from that, the bike the man took here was still lying in the middle of the path. That would be an issue. The police could tell whose motorcycle it was by looking at its license plate. And they wouldn't just leave it at that. Thankfully, the corpse was in a dark forest. In terms of urgency, dealing with the bike would come first. And I wanted to get the shovel back from where I left it next to that hole. I shouldn't drag the body there. I would have to deal with it right here. Fortunately, the ground was like mud from the downpour and was more sludgy than where I was before. I might be able to dig a grave quickly here. Of course, my bicycle was still over where I'd left it too. Still wasn't over. Homicide had only been half of my goal. The other half would be just as important as the first. I would completely hide the body, not allowing a beginning to happen. I would erase the man like he'd never existed, and regain the peaceful times we had before. I bent my head backwards, calmed my mind even further. The big water droplets struck my brow mercilessly. They were actually quite comfortable, and for a while I let my desire have its way. After confirming that I was sharp again, I started running through the rain. The motorcycle was in the grass at the roadside. Considering how it looked, pelted with rain and covered in mud, it actually seemed like it had been lying there for a very long time. The plan was to drop the motorcycle into the swamp. The swamp was a bit of a walk from here. I lifted the bike up. I didn't think it would be so heavy. I was a little surprised. Once I had it upright, it was fairly easy to roll it along. Still, pushing this thing all the way to the swamp was not really something I wanted to do. I could no longer ignore my exhaustion, and it warned me numerous times of how far away the swamp was. This motorcycle, I wonder if I could ride it well enough. Once I got it going, it would basically be the same as a bicycle. Wouldn't it get me to the swamp quickly? A planned suggestion by my exhaustion. The anxiety of getting on the motorcycle for the first time withdrew. I turned the key, and then you just kick this pedal, right? Yeah! It's on, and then I gripped at the handlebars. First the right, then the left. Maybe I twisted them too much. The bike lurched and did a wheelie like an angry horse. I lost it for a second. It was just a problem of how much torque to apply. Let's try that again. This time slowly, gently. That time it went well. It was strange to be on a two-wheel vehicle that would go even if I didn't pedal. Very odd. But I got used to it quickly. Leon once told me you could get a scooter license within a day, and she was clearly right. This was pretty easy. I needed to throw the metal bat into the swamp too, but I didn't know how I would pack the bat onto the motorcycle. Without much other choice, I stuffed it into the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. I am just now worrying about the volume, so I'm lowering the volume a little bit. Jesus Christ, 4.5 hours into the stream. But I'm looking at it, the thing in the bottom of the screen. It doesn't matter to you, but it looks like, yeah, anyway, I'm probably going to be very sad when I look at this later, I'm guessing. Anyway, not much other choice. I stuffed it into the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. I put the tip down the seat of my pants and hunched over. It went fine. I got back on the bike, and this time got going without any difficulty. I carefully pressed the button labeled light, and a rather strong light came on, illuminating the way forward. I probably really shouldn't have turned it on, but I didn't have any way of seeing at this point and had zero confidence I could ride through this darkness. As the rain came down on me, I maintained a precarious balance and inched my way towards the swamp. Along the way, I ran across a few people who seemed to be returning from the festival, but none of them had any interest in me. They were all soaked through with rain and hurrying on their ways home, or had their umbrellas low and their heads down. Yesterday, I might have been wary of even these passerby. But right now, it didn't seem to be much cause for concern. In fact, it would probably be less suspicious to be riding out in the open like this instead of sneaking around. More and more, though, I started to think of that idea as naive, brought on by my exhausted state. I climbed a steep hill. On a bike, the hill would have put me out of breath, but I just had to accelerate a little bit to climb the entire thing. Motorcycles sure are convenient. For a moment, its lights illuminated a sign before I passed by it. Onigafuchi Swamp. Good children do not play around here. Still, it wasn't like the way to the swamp was cordoned off by a metal fence or anything. Parents and teachers would get mad if they found out you're playing at the swamp, but some of the bad kids of my class apparently snuck out here sometimes to see the giant crayfish in the place. They talked before about how they'd go to the candy shop and buy some pickled squid, then just tie it to a fishing line and throw it, and all the crayfish would come running. I'm very worried about what I'm seeing down there now. Oh god, if this whole stream is just unlistenable, I'm going to be very sad. Once I got up to the bank, there was a tiny ritual shrine and traditional ropes on one of the trees. And as it swallowed the downpour whole, the blackened swamp had waited for me. If I slammed on the accelerator from the cliff-like stop I was on now, this thing would fly straight into the middle of the swamp. I had to be careful not to fall in with it. If I drowned or disappeared, man, what a stupid ghost story that would be. On the night of Watanagashi, Satoko's uncle's corpse was found in a thicket by the road leading to town, and Keiichi Mayabara went missing. People would whisper that I'd been demoned away. The 5th year's curse would be a half-baked one. I got off the bike and twisted the accelerator as hard as I could. I let go just when it seemed it would drag me forward. The bike shot off the cliff and was swallowed down into the swamp, leaving a far fainter splash than I'd imagined. Its surface was being pummeled by the downpour, and the muddy, filthy water was flowing into it. I couldn't even make out the motorbike I'd just thrown in there. I was pretty heavy after all. It would be quickly engulfed by the soft mud at the bottom of the swamp, and it would be pulled deeper and deeper until it reached hell itself. I felt no reluctance whatsoever in throwing the man's motorbike down to the land of the demons. But I did have a tinge of regret when I did it with Satoshi's bat. The muddy water washed off the gore sticking to it, and it sunk easily. I'd sort of shared today's events with Satoshi, so I wanted to give it a quiet place to stay. That's how I felt. I started to feel more like returning it to the locker from before, so it could continue to keep watch over Satoko. Satoshi, I probably, misunderstood you. Satoshi listened quietly without nodding. I am absolutely convinced now. You were the one who beat your aunt to death last year and saved Satoko. I always scorned you and called you a coward who ran away. I was wrong. To the rest of the world, some deviant was behind that incident. But I know. That was something you did for her. And then you disappeared. You finally got back that peace and lost it within days. So, I swear to you that I will live life to the fullest from now on. Live it enough for the both of us. I will live on as though this day, never happened. But I will never forget this short time we shared together for as long as I lived. I didn't know what expression Satoshi made as he listened, but as someone who had protected the same girl, I felt he had smiled and given me his blessing. And then, my hand moved of its own accord, and the bat I had hesitated to throw away left my hands and flew through the air. It traveled its parabolic path, spinning all the while, and the swamp absorbed it without a sound. There weren't even any ripples when it hit the surface. That surface was tempestuous because of the downpour, and that bat was long gone. For a moment, I regretted having thrown it, but I realized that might have been what Satoshi wanted. You're right. I still can't let myself give it to emotion just yet. I would return for my shovel, get on my bike, dig a hole to hide the body, and bury it. It seemed like a simple sequence of events, but I felt extremely exhausted. And I had to do it all tonight. Satoshi left me with only the advice that I needed to finish this up soon. I then fell silent for eternity, and disappeared at the bottom of the demon's abyss. I returned to the path I had ambushed her uncle on. My bike was hidden, sleeping in the brush. I stood it back up. My whole body felt heavy. But I needed to finish this by the end of the day, even if I had to whip myself to do it. Oh, I forgot something. I didn't just come here for my bike. The shovel was here too. Not good. I was zoning out. Every once in a while, if I let my guard down, my vision would almost go black. Pull yourself together, Keiichi Mayabara. It's still not over. I went into the grove of trees and looked for the hole in which I hidden the shovel. Unfortunately, I had hidden it deep in the forest, not wanting it to be seen, and now everything was black in the night, and I couldn't see anything anymore. I reawakened my fading consciousness and realized just how big this annoyance really was. Wait, can't be serious. The sweat the rain washed away before became back up to my skin, deep in the forest, where the streetlights could never reach. The fact that would be so pitch black had been completely uncalculated. With this much darkness, even if I had been able to kill him right away like I'd planned, I didn't know if I could still have buried him without a problem. What should I do? I simply couldn't find the shovel tonight. If I forced myself to go deep into the forest, I'd lose even my sense of direction and might actually get lost in there. That might have been an exaggeration, but it was fully possible I'd trip over a tree root and strain a muscle. Alright. There was another shovel in my house's storage room. Same fold-up kind. I'd go back to the house, get the shovel, and give up on finding the shovel tonight. It's not as though the name Maya Bar is written on the shovel, but it seemed like an unusual item from an import variety store and made in another country, so I didn't want to leave that shovel here, but in this darkness, I couldn't do anything. I should give up and go back to the storage room, and there was an electric lantern in there. If I used that for light, I could look for it, but it was so extremely dark. Could I light the way with just the lantern? The light of a lantern in this dark night, I couldn't discard the possibility of it drawing eyes, and I doubted if I could find the shovel with the lantern's feeble light. Besides, I'd left the body there for a pretty long time already. My sense of fear, dulled through excessive exhaustion, finally reared its ugly head. Anyway, for now, the most important thing was to hide the body. A shovel being found wouldn't be a big deal, but a corpse? They found that. I'd share the same fate as Satoshi. First, I'd go back to the storage room at home, and I'd get the lantern. Now that it's gotten this dark, I might still need light to dig a hole for the body, too. And I'd get the other shovel, and I'd deal with the body first, then. Once that was done, I'd come back here, find the shovel, and bring it back. I had to do at least that much. I was so tired. But complaining was getting me nowhere. If I started getting complacent now, everything will have been for naught. At some point I had sat down. I gritted my teeth and endured, lifting my heavy hips. Because apparently Heiichi is dummy thick. The night was young. Of all the nights I'd experienced, none had ever been this long. When would it all end? The night was young. The lights at home were dazzlingly bright. Suddenly, they reminded me of how hungry I was. I checked the clock and saw that it was almost 7. I thought for sure it was 2 or 3 in the morning already. I was surprised at how messed up my biological clock had gotten from this one night. There was a warm light coming from the curtains in the living room window. The worlds between here and what was beyond those curtains were so different. If only that man hadn't shown up, I would have been in that light. I'd still be excited from the festival, and I'd be talking to my parents about how much fun I had with all my friends. And then, even though they had made a hot meal for me, I would have eaten too much at the stalls, barely eaten any of it. Gone back to my room. No doubt I'd crawl into my futon and easily let myself fall to sleep. But right now, I was completely different. There wasn't a single ember of warmth from those weak streetlights. Right now, I was unconnected to any time spent with my family, and there was neither warm food nor the time to allow myself to sleep. My body exposed to the cold rain, I knew that I simply had to spur myself on to accomplish what I must. I realized how timid, how cowardly I was becoming. For what reason did I need to kill someone, even if it felt this terrible? I'd lost sight of my purpose. I selected the fastest, most fundamental way of saving Satoko and executed it without hesitation. That man was dead. He was gone. He would never, ever hurt Satoko again. We all thought frantically for days on end about Satoko's problem. And finally, with no options, we gave up. And I had solved it in one night. By myself, without anyone's help. Right about now, Satoko would be making dinner for her uncle. Despite not knowing when he'd return, and she might be spending the night trembling in fear of whether he'd yell at her for how it tasted. But her uncle wouldn't come home. She wouldn't have to fear his wrath, nor let him make her feel sad. I see. I did it. I successfully saved Satoko. All I'd been thinking about for a long time was killing that man. And I'd forgotten the feeling that it was all to save her. I did. I did something good. That's right. I did something good, didn't I? I felt hot tears coming from my eyes. That's when I first realized that the exhaustion I'd been feeling was actually guilt. The blade of guilt, for a while now, had just been scraping away with its tip, hurting my heart. It hurt so bad I couldn't stand it. It was throbbing painfully. It hurt so much, it was so painful that I cried. I cried tears of joy at saving Satoko. I didn't know why, really, anymore. I just cried. My tears fell and fell as I stood there for a while. Coming to terms with those warm tears, my heart was comforted a little. Alright, Keiichi Maebara. It's enough. There's nothing to regret or feel ashamed about. Both my body and my mind were thoroughly exhausted, and that was a fact. So now I'm worried I turned the volume down too low. I'll turn it back up a little bit, because the rain sound was what was really worrying me, so I'm just turning it up a bit again. Hopefully I've not totally fucked up this stream beyond repair, but who knows. That was a fact. It was only natural I couldn't feel anything. Even tomorrow and the day after that, I might not be able to feel anything for a while. But there was one thing that was true. It was the undisputable fact that I had saved Satoko. One day, we would surely be rewarded. One day, I would be proud of how distressing an enterprise I had undertaken to get Satoko's smile back. So that I could wait for that day, I had to put up the finishing touches on this night. If I left it undone, everything I'd accomplished today would be for naught. I looked back up at the sky, which didn't look like it would stop raining anytime soon. Then I rubbed my eyes and summoned forth energy from my core again. How long did I plan on spacing out? This isn't the time for daydreaming. Someone could find that corpse this very moment. That pessimistic thought was proof the very natural emotion of fear had returned to me. As I allowed the fear to spur me onwards, I went to look for the other shovel and lantern inside the storage room. It was fortunate. I remembered what it looked like around the street light the body was near. How dark it was quite... I'm now going to lower it again. Okay, I hope I didn't fuck it up again, but we'll see. It was fortunate I remembered what it looked like around the street light the body was near. With how dark it was quite possible I wouldn't have been able to look for it either. I didn't realize that when I left the place, so the idea of memorizing the spot hadn't even crossed my mind. And that's why I had to call it fortunate that I managed to get back to the body like this. The corpse was now located in a big muddy puddle. Half the thing had already sunk into the swamp-like pool of water. I only realized afterwards, but there was an unused irrigation channel right nearby, clogged with fallen leaves and dirt. And there was rainwater flowing in there. My shoes had been awash with water for a long time now. So without any hesitation, I stepped into the puddle. The whole muddy stream started flowing back, luckily. I couldn't leave any slight traces like blood stains. The rain was like a blessing from heaven. I checked around me, paying very close attention, and I turned off the lantern. It became pitch black, but my eyes got used to the darkness in a few moments. God, the idea of it being dark, it just occurred to me, the idea of it being dark at 7 o'clock in the middle of summer. I mean, maybe I guess no, it's July now. No. Like, it's still light out. Easily at that time. God, well, it was 1983, and I mean, obviously in Japan, but still. And once I managed to reach the streetlight on the other side, I was able to make out even faint lights. I stuck the shovel into the puddle right next to the corpse. The ground was even looser here than I'd thought, and the shovel's tip easily slid inside. I had to hurry and dig. If I took too much time, I might lose my energy and strength again. It felt almost like digging a hole in the sand at the beach. It was easy to dig, but no matter what, the muddy water kept flowing in and covering the hole. The digging wasn't going as well as I'd hoped. I dug, and the water would go in, and so I couldn't get a sense of how deep it was. The only way to measure It was to bury my own foot in the mud. I'm digging just fine. It's all right. Don't be disheartened. Dig, 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 dig. Occasionally a car would come by on the road, and I'd hurry to hide myself in the trees. Everyone was only passing through. They wouldn't have their eyes peeled in this kind of darkness. I understood it logically, but I still couldn't help but hide. What I was really scared of wasn't quite that one of those cars would coincidentally happen to witness me here. It was true that the distance I could spot cars from was getting gradually shorter. At first I noticed the splashing sounds from really far away as cars drove through them. I started noticing them less and less, and with the car that just passed by, I didn't notice it until its headlights were upon me. I felt my senses growing duller by the second. If someone were to take a peek in secret as I was burying the body at the worst possible time, maybe I wouldn't even notice. The moment I thought that, I took a good look all around me. I roused my half-asleep senses and searched for signs of presence nearby. What if I found out someone was spying on me from the trees? Carnivorous feeling snarled at me, glaring. If there was, then I would dig another hole. Come this far already. In order to achieve perfection, I didn't care how much more I had to pay. I didn't know what kind of face I was making at the time, but it was definitely a fervently glaring one. My 5 senses reached the conclusion that nobody was present. And then breathed a sigh of relief. How long had I been digging this mud out of here? It was deep enough for it to go up to my knees. Maybe this was enough. Maybe I'd throw the corpse in as a test. I swallowed, getting my breathing under control. Despite how much I'd beaten him, I was afraid of touching the corpse. So instead, I dragged it by the feet to the hole. It took more than just a waggle and a tug to do it. But of course it did, considering this man's weight. Considering this man's weight was easily 80 kilograms, I rallied all my strength and dragged him. At this point, my groundless fears that he might suddenly start moving had vanished long ago. His body fit perfectly into the muddy hole. It was more than deep enough. All right, let's bury him. Quickly, quickly, quickly. If I did a perfect job of burying it here, everything would be over. I would hide it in the hole, and none of this would have ever happened. When I realized I only had a little farther to go to finish everything, I was racked with pointless anxiety like I was in a race against time. It was like I was absorbed in a delusion that if I didn't bury the body quickly, it might come back to life. In any case, in a great rush, I poured mud and dirt into the hole. If I didn't work efficiently, someone might find me here. Until now, I figured if someone saw, I'd just kill them. But not anymore. I was arrested with such absolute fear that if some saw me, it would be all over. When I finished the work off, it was a total mess. Splish splash, squish squash. I drew the surface of the shovel across the ground, trying to make it flat. I was completely covered in mud at that point. The rain washed the mud off my body, but not off my now blackened clothing. My body and mind were caked with panic, with fear, with rain and sweat and mud. My shoulders heaving, I threw down the shovel and sat down in the mud. I was so exhausted that I wanted to lie down right here and sleep. It was over. This time. For real. It was over. The man was now in the bottom of the wet dirt. Right this moment, there were traces that this place had been dug up. But the rain and flowing muddy water would completely cover it all within moments. Yes, it was over. I did it. I did it. I did it, you motherfucker! I did it! And then I fell over backwards, face up in the mud. Raindrops pelted my face without mercy, but I didn't care. After staying there for a while, resting my mind, I got up again. It was over. So let's go home. You already buried the whole thing. So now it's like it never happened. It never happened. So there's no reason for me to stay out here and get rained on. I wobbled to my feet. I wouldn't use the shovel anymore. I considered disassembling it, but I didn't have the strength in my absolute exhaustion. I didn't really need to take it apart anyway. Dragging the shovel behind me, I headed towards the light. I stood up my bike. It had been laying in the grass by the road. I didn't know how I was going to get the still assembled shovel into the front basket. I put the shovel down in the back of my shirt like I'd done with the baseball bat. Unlike the bat, the corner of it was on my back, making it very painful. Plus, if I relaxed my posture even a little, it would fall out behind me. I ended up having to carry the shovel in my left hand and ride on my bike using only my right hand. Not only was I in a state of total exhaustion, this was also a downpour. One hand on the handlebars, I was swaying to and fro like a drunk, but I didn't care. Even swaying like this, I got a little closer to home every time I pedaled. I saw two lights swaying slowly in front of me. A car was approaching. Oh no, I need to get out of the way. From far away in the shadows of the darkness, a car appeared. Its dazzling lights washed over me. I know words. The driver made a short honk of the horn to inform me I was in the middle of the road. I have to get out of the way. I kept telling myself that, but not only was I riding one-handed, I was exhausted, so I couldn't do anything. Wobble, 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 wobble. I meandered about, not going to the right or left. The driver decided to swerve out of the way right in front of me, and without lowering its speed much, steadily came towards me. Its outline grew larger in my vision, and telling myself again that I really needed to get out of the way, I jerked the handlebars in one direction, then lost my balance and fell over, bike and all. My whole body splayed out, and one foot got caught in the bike. This was seriously bad. My drowsiness quickly vanished, and just as a cold sweat broke out on my skin, the driver recklessly spun the wheel to the left, made a counterclockwise U-turn, and came right up to me and stopped. The driver's seat door opened, and the driver came out. "You idiot, what are you doing here?" I was pretty sure someone would yell at me like that. Oh my. Look at who it is. It was a woman's voice, and one I knew. I lifted my face off the ground and looked at her. Takano-san. Good evening. The moon is very pretty tonight. Mayabara-kun. It was raining far too hard to see the moon. Takano-san unfolded an umbrella and smiled as she spoke. That smile was, for some reason, uncanny. Like she'd seen right through me. And of all the people I could have met, I got a sudden feeling that this was the one I wanted to see the least. "What are you doing out so late? You're soaked and covered in mud and no umbrella either. What is that? A shovel?" She had come here via car. She wouldn't have known what I was just doing, and yet she smiled as though she knew everything. Calm down, Keiichi, my butter." She always makes that mysterious-looking smile, remember? That's why when people see her, they go, "Hello, no, oh God, stay away." Don't let her on to anything lest you dig your own grave. Rumors say you were playing baseball with a golf club. Is that what the shovel's for, too? You're using it as an umbrella. I should tell a good lie here. If I could just do that, things would work out. When I went with Verena to go digging for treasure at the dam, we forgot this there. And you went to get it in this downpour. When I left my house, I didn't think it would rain, so... Oh, it's been raining for a while, though. You've been out for quite some time, haven't you? Well, yes. I was kind of wandering around. Even so, you came from that direction, didn't you? The dam is in the opposite direction, you know. Takano-san was clearly aware that something exceedingly abnormal was happening with me. And as she played her little word games, she was enjoying driving me into a corner. Maybe she had a vague guess just from the situation of what I'd been doing. My timing really sucked to run into her of all people of all times. At the very end, I could only be frustrated at my terrible luck. I've done so much. The end was literally right around the corner. So why, at the very end, very end, did I run into her, of all people? What do you do, Keiichi Maibara? You're still holding something that could be a dangerous weapon. Will you silence Takano-san? Even if it would be simple to kill Takano-san, dealing with a car she'd come in afterward would be an issue. I couldn't drive a car. It was completely different from a motorbike, but even if the car was here, so long as there was no proof I killed her. Yes, it's tonight's downpour, without any prior planning, all by coincidence. A hit and run. As long as I didn't drop any handkerchiefs with my initials on them, they would never know I killed her. Black flame quietly smoldered and raged in the core of my body. That's a scary look. Did I tease you too much? Takano-san started to laugh by herself and thankfully stopped talking about it. But the dark clouds in my mind didn't go away. Leaving that aside, how long are you planning on crawling on the ground with your bike like that? Would you mind moving out of the way? If I moved, she would leave, so I tried to get the bicycle out of the way, but then twisted my ankle in it and fell over. Ow, shit, ow, ow, ugh. There was a sharp pain in the ankle I twisted. This is nonsense! A sprained ankle now? Oh my. Are you alright? Did you twist your ankle? Takano-san squats down and takes a good look at the ankle I keep rubbing. She compares it to my facial expression, apparently trying to gauge how bad the wound was. Can you stand? I didn't expect to, but I couldn't even stand up. It was all I could do to shamelessly wriggle on the ground like a caterpillar. Takano-san looked at her watch, then at her car, and after thinking for a moment, opened the passenger seat's door, and then gave me her shoulder to stand up with. I'll take you home. I do feel bad, since it's almost like I hit you. I'm sorry. I wouldn't just leave you there. It's a good thing I'm a nice person. Nobody good has ever called themselves a nice person. That would have been a terrible thing to say to someone holding me up like this. I took Takano's hands and sat down in the passenger's seat. Takano-san went around the back and looked at my bike on the ground. I don't suppose we could take the bicycle home tomorrow? I could clearly tell that she thought it would be a pain since it would be heavy and get her car dirty. But my bike has the name that bar written on it. I couldn't leave it out here like this. Well, can you somehow put it in the car? I sort of need it. The trunk is already full. If I put it in the back seat, it'll get the seats dirty with mud. Well, given how you are already in here, it's already dirty, I suppose. I turned back to the back seat and see someone's folding bicycle there already. It still looked big enough to fit my bike in there as well. My expression reflected my thoughts, and the exact thoughts seemed to get through to her. Alright, I'll put it in here for you. I'll be really nice, but just for tonight, okay? Takano-san continued with her mean jokes, but she hoisted my bike and loaded it into the back seat for me. The mean jokes were one thing, but couldn't she do something about that eerie smile of hers? And even more importantly than the bike, I didn't want to leave the shovel here. That shovel could be directly connected to the buried body and to me. I'm sorry to ask another favor, but could you get my shovel too? Takano-san gave me a clearly dubious expression. Your shovel? That's fine with me. Is it important? The more I talk, the worse it gets for me. That's how I felt, so I didn't force myself to answer her, eventually outlasted by my silence. Takano-san gave a short shrug and sighed. Alright, I understand. You need your shovel, right? You don't need to make such a mean face. Takano-san brought over the shovel that was lying in the middle of the road. I clutched it like I'd never let it go again. Takano-san watched me with a puzzled look. Okay, let's be off. Mayabara-kun, you live at the Mayabara Mansion, don't you? Why does everyone call my house the Mayabara Mansion? Because it's actually a mansion. It must be nice to be rich. As she spoke, Takano-san pulled the handbrake and stepped on the gas. After making a skillful U-turn using the shoulder of the road, she steadily increased in speed. From the rear-view mirror, that accursed place seemed to melt into the darkness. Reed? Huh? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. What was that? Takano-san suddenly tried to say something to me, but thoughtlessly I didn't catch it. Looking ahead, Takano-san said the same thing one more time. The body. Ooh. The body. How well was it buried? Ooh. Oh, and it's my favorite track. Here it comes. I'm gonna let it go ahead and get in. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. thought my heart might beat out of my chest, but I didn't let it show. But my lungs were squeezed tight, and I couldn't breathe. What are you talking about? When burying bodies in mountains like these, you have to bury it fairly deep because wild dogs will often smell the corpse and dig it out. Some human bone a wild dog brings back in its mouth leads to an incident being uncovered. The police head out to a stretch of mountains. It actually happens pretty often, you know. Pound, pound, clang, clang. Huge rusted bells start ringing in my head. Had I buried it so deep that I could say it absolutely wouldn't be found? The answer was no. I was in such a rush to bury him and get it over with. I couldn't deny having possibly buried it too close to the surface. No, wait, anyway. This woman, how does she know? She just passed by here in her car by coincidence. And we ran into each other by coincidence. If she'd been watching the entire thing from the trees once I left, she came back in her car? It didn't make logical sense. So then, why? Ichimabara, that's it. You need to kill her. My entire body reawakened. And I could feel my pupils dilate. I couldn't possibly beat her to death with a shovel in such a small car. Then I would use my hands and strangle her. But she was driving right now. If I strangled her, we might get into an accident. Then suddenly Takano-san turned around and looked at me. What? No witty retort? For a moment I was surprised. What was she talking about? It would seem we're not a very good match, Takano-san said, disappointed, returning her gaze ahead. I repeated the words she'd said a few times in my head, and realized she'd meant it as an off-color joke. I didn't know whether it was really a joke, but I wouldn't be able to fool her no matter how many lies I told. Right now, with her driving the car like this, I couldn't kill her. I would have an even harder time doing it when we got back to my house. That moment we met, that had been my best chance, and to have missed it so easily, it hurt. After that, Takano-san didn't say a single word. The car was completely buried in an almost suffocating silence. What kind of woman had I run into? With everything that happened today, I managed to pull it off. And at the very end of it all, I just had to go home and go back to sleep. But bad luck. Thoughts. As my sleepiness gradually overtook me, the anxiety I felt started to matter less and less. Is this alright, Ichimabara? You probably did not leave this woman alive. Right now, I'm tired. She stepped on the brakes, and I jerked against my seatbelt. That woke me up. I thought I must have fallen asleep by accident. I looked out the window, and there was a big building with faint lights on. It was really dark out, but I knew immediately it was my house. I'll go get your folks for you. Would you mind the place for a few moments while I'm gone? Don't make fun of me, please. Besides, look, I'm fine now. I can walk by myself. You were in such pain before that you had to get me to carry you. Did you just want a pretty lady to be nice to you? As Takano-san spoke, she left the car and opened up her umbrella. The sound of falling raindrops was fierce as always. I carefully reached down and rubbed the ankle I'd twisted. There was still some pain and a little weirdness, but they weren't that bad anymore. Rather than being happy about how light the wound was, I first regretted the whole thing. If I hadn't twisted my ankle, I could have still taken the option of killing Takano-san right then and there. There probably wasn't much doubt that Takano-san was convinced I was involved in some sort of crime. If she knew about everything happening with Satoko, then she might have even guessed I'd killed somebody. Click, click. Takano-san opened the passenger side door for me. You sure you don't need my shoulders? I wouldn't mind doing it for you again. I ignored her and answered by getting out of the car by myself. The rain was still pretty intense. got my bicycle out of the back seat. I was a bit curious who the other bike belonged to, but that didn't matter right now. I let Takano-san hold the umbrella over me, then pushed my bicycle up to the front door. Thank you very much. I'll be fine now. My ankle hurt so much earlier, and it still did, but it aggravated me that it hadn't even been that bad. It was really, seriously, terrible luck. Alright, I will be leaving then. Keep it a secret that we had a nice evening drive together by ourselves, okay? Especially from Jiro-san. Oh, she meant Tomitake-san. I suppose she calls him by his first name. His full name, then, must be Jiro Tomitake. And the other folded bike, the folding one in the back seat that I didn't care about at first, suddenly came to mind. Hey, excuse me, you're from Minamizawa, right? On the day before yesterday, as I walked near the dam, half asleep, Tomitake-san had talked to me, and the bicycle he'd been riding, it was... That bicycle in the back belongs to Tomitake-san, doesn't it? Takano-san's eyes, I think they sharpened for a moment. And why do you think that? I saw it when I met him before. The frame stood out to me. But wouldn't that be odd? You think it's possible for this to be Jiro-san's bike? Odd, uh-huh. Takano-san, her hair elegantly fluttering, peers into my eyes. Well, there are no bed and breakfasts in Hinamizawa, are there? Jiro-san would need to be staying in town. Is that so? Well, I guess that's right, huh? You can't really walk from town to Hinamizawa, can you? And there are no buses either. You at least need a bicycle. She didn't need to tell me that. That's why Jiro-san was riding a bike. For Jiro-san's bicycle to be stowed in my car, and him not in there. That would be strange, wouldn't it? It would mean Jiro-san was in Hinamizawa without a bike. I'd have to have left Jiro-san somewhere and put his bike in the car, wouldn't I? It wouldn't make sense. As she spoke, Takano-san made eyes like a hawk. Unfortunately, I didn't really understand what was so odd. What about that is so odd? Aren't you and Tomitake-san friends? I don't really think it would be strange for there to be some reason you had his bicycle in your car. Oh, but it would be. What I mean is, Jiro-san and his bicycle being in different places in Hinamizawa wouldn't make sense. And for those reasons, it means this bicycle can't be his. Do you understand now? Takano-san's roundabout way of talking was hard to comprehend, but that eeriness I could feel, that vague dreadfulness. I didn't like it at all, but the most wild instinctive part of me warned me not to pry. That's my bicycle. Jiro-san picked it out for me, though, so I can't deny that it looks alike. Ah, I see now. I thought it looked similar. You and I never saw each other tonight, and now she was talking about something completely different. What are you talking about? You and I never saw each other tonight. I stayed there not knowing what to say, and Takano-san repeated her eerie, succinct phrase for me again. You and I never met this night. You and I never saw each other tonight. Something cold and unpleasant crawled up my spine. I knew, because I'd killed a person with my own hands before. Before I came to the conclusion that I only had one chance to beat this woman to death to keep her quiet, and I couldn't hesitate. So I could tell that she'd arrived at the very same conclusion. My instincts warned me again. I wish I'd never met this woman. A faint sense, like a rotten smell drifting from this woman, was no doubt the exact same sense that I was giving off right now. The very peculiar aspiration, the lack of uncertainty, and taking a human's life for a purpose, one that only those who have risen above everything have. Actually, maybe I should have called it nausea. It meant, and I didn't know how to explain this very well, but Takano-san was the same as me. In other words, Someone who shouldn't have been here. Someone I couldn't have let anybody know was here. Someone who nobody would have wanted to see, and now that we had, we could calmly pretend as though we never met. Yes. Which meant that just like I wanted to have nothing else to do with her, she didn't want anything to do with me either. And she, too, wanted to make it so that we never met. Both of us wished for the same thing. Our desires were the same, which meant Takano-san's suggestion was extremely practical, and that I couldn't outright refuse. If that's fine with you, then sure, whatever. You and I didn't meet this night. You're right. That would be best for you too, wouldn't it? Why do you think that? Are you seriously asking me that? You can't figure that out on your own, boy. She cut me off with the condescending word boy. Right in front of my house, in a place most unsuited to killing, and yet there was a frozen thirst for blood coming from both of us. I would be killed right here, right now. Yeah. Then I should have definitely beaten her as we passed each other. A damp, greasy sweat broke out of my body. That's fine. If you want me, you can come any time. And when I made up my mind, she shook her hair elegantly and turned on her heel. Good. I am a kind person, after all. What was good? How? Because she was a kind person? Was that it? I didn't get it. Takano-san got into her car. We didn't exchange any words of parting. I had performed a massive feat, the killing of Satoko's uncle, and yet I didn't feel any accomplishment. On the holy night of Oyashiro-sama's curse, on which the taking of another's life was allowed. On the terribly rainy night when the demons wandered as agents of Oyashiro-sama's will. The demons were never supposed to meet, but suddenly they did. The demons parted ways triumphantly. There was no reason for them to fight. Both their objectives had already been accomplished. With the rain hitting me like a waterfall, my eyes met with Takano-san's through the car window. The female demon, her mouth twisted into a distorted and fearless smile. It was too late to kill her. Far, far too late. That first moment, the very first moment we saw each other, had been my best chance, and now that we had parted like this, I was acutely aware of it. I should not have let her live. She beeped her horn quickly, and then her car drove away into the deluge. The one woman who knew what really happened that night disappeared into the dark. As long as she was alive, this night would never really end. Just get into an accident, I thought to myself, in this downpour, slip on some mud or something and fly face first into a tree and die. That wasn't a delusion, a wild flight of fantasy. It was an earnest wish, yes. It was a command. Die. Die. Keep your mouth shut for eternity. As I have no doubt you're wishing for me to die all the same. My curse upon her faded emptily as Takano-san's tail light disappeared into the utter darkness. The car's lights were completely out of sight now. Even the sound of the engine faded into the sound of the heavy rain and was inaudible now. I, too, turned on my heel to draw the curtains on this insane night. To open my front door and end it all, I began walking towards the front door. It was covered in mud, and I made a squishing sound with every step I took. Squish. Squish. Don't worry, Keiichi, my butter. Squish. Squish. She'll die. Squish. Squish. Her end will be as miserable as she is. I'll throw her into some flames alive, and let her dance until she's burned to a crisp. I'll burn her into the ashes in the fires of hell itself until she's roasted as much as she deserves. I wish. I really do. Squish. Huh? Just now, I hadn't taken a step. I did a footstep. Without emotion, I turned around. If there was a footprint that wasn't my own, then it was obvious someone else was behind me. Was somebody else there? I was sick of this. Whoever it was, I was sick of everything tonight. This time I would kill them. I'd kill them without a second thought. I wouldn't hesitate to turn around and dig another hole. But fortunately, there was nobody there. I wasn't going to have to kill any more people tonight. This night, I couldn't handle any more of it. Even if I'd heard an extra footstep each time I stopped, I'd put it down to me just being tired. Oof, that was intense. Oh, it was good shit, too. Shit. Fire from hell, victim of the 5th year. Alright, I think we're gonna, oh my god, it's 2:15. Alright, let's read the tips and then I'm gonna go to bed. Oh, you need the hospital or the fire department? The fire department. Is there a fire or some other... Oh, guess my song! Is there a fire or some other accident? Please speak slowly and calmly. I think it's a fire. This is the rest area on the highway. I can see a ton of fire and smoke coming up from the mountains behind us. Nobody goes back there, so I don't know why anything got lit on fire. Anyway, I figured I should let you know. It could turn into a forest fire. I understand. I need to know exactly where you are, so please tell me your name, a phone number we can use to get in touch with you, and the exact location of the fire. Notice from the fire department headquarters. We have a report of a suspicious fire on the western slopes of the mountain. Given its distance from the road, it could be a couple's bonfire or someone unlawfully burning trash. The location is deep in the woods. No homes in the area, but the fire could spread. Immediately go to the site to verify. Is this the fire station? This is the Blunt District Fire Department branch. We arrived moments ago at the reported area. Fire confirmed to be a burning oil drum left in the mountains. The fire is calming, and there is no chance it will spread. And, well, in the oil drum, I think it might be a person. Like, a person burned with kerosene or something. Oh, I think maybe we should get the police over here. There's no mistaking it. This is a person. Eee! Alright, let's hit the second one up. Victim of the 5th year. This year's curse, then. That's what it looks like. He kills them differently every year, but this is particularly conspicuous, isn't it? Clawing out your own throat. That isn't normal. Let's leave the rest to the old man in forensics. Sure we'll find some suspicious drugs. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Oh, Oishi-san. Tomiyama-san and the others have arrived. Oishi-san, much appreciated. Well, it would seem we have a pretty crazy one this year. Yes, we've been outsmarted. I was absolutely under the impression that Teppei Honjo would get killed tonight. Who is the deceased? Jiro Tomitake, a photographer with a hobby for coming to Hinamizawa a few times a year. We didn't even have him marked. I wonder what happened. Did they realize we were watching the Hojo residents the whole time and decide to switch their target? Maybe. We sure flubbed this one. And there are no problems with Teppei Hojo? Correct. His daughter left for the festival in the evening, and a little while later he left on his motorbike. Daughter came back for... Wait. Has he not come back yet? Is he still out drinking somewhere? Oishi-san, are you there? Call from Chief Takasugi. He's on the line in car 1. Ooh, the plot thickens. Anyway, that was that. And, yeah. I believe it's time for this Justiguy to hit, the bed sack time thing. Oh my god, I've been going for almost 5.5 hours just talking. Anyway, I doubt anyone's been watching. But yeah, I don't know when I'll continue. I think we're getting close to the end. I mean, I know we're getting relatively close to the end. But yeah. This is good. It's good stuff. And I know I need to, I'd like this, if anyone is watching to the end of a 5-hour stream to get this message, but I know I'll get back to Conception and Dark Souls soon, don't worry. But anyway, in the meantime though, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to say that this is going to have to be farewell.